Imagine what's possible when learning doesn't get in the way of life. At Capella University, our game-changing FlexPath learning format lets you set your own deadlines so you can learn at a time and pace that works for you. It's an education you can tailor to your schedule. That means you don't have to put your life on hold to pursue your professional goals. Instead, enjoy learning your way and earn your degree without missing a beat. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
I think you're on mute.
Workday starting to sound the same?
I think you're on mute.
Find something that sounds better for your career on LinkedIn. With LinkedIn Job Collections, you can browse curated collections by relevant industries and benefits, like flex PTO or hybrid workplaces, so you can find the right job for you. Get started at linkedin.com/jobs. Finding where you fit. LinkedIn knows how.
This episode is brought to you by Rakuten. If you're shopping while working, eating, or even listening to this podcast, then you know and love the thrill of the hunt. But are you getting the thrill of the best deals? Rakuten shoppers do. They get the brands they love with the most savings and cash back. And you can get it too. Start getting cash back at your favorite stores like Samsung, Expedia, and Sephora. And even stack sales on top of cash back. It's easy to use, and you get your cash back through PayPal or check. The idea is simple. Stores pay Rakuten for sending them shoppers, and Rakuten shares the money with you as cash back. Download the free Rakuten app and never miss a deal. Or go to Rakuten.com to start getting the most bang for your buck. That's RAKUTEN.
Welcome to My Weekly Mixtape, a podcast that takes the classic mixtape approach to building a modern playlist. I'm your host, Brian Colburn. Tonight, we are going to go back in time for a bonus Tunestiles throwback episode because this week it's the Super Bowl, so what better time than to revisit this really fun episode that Jay Sweet and I did with Justin Penik, co-host of the Talking Giants podcast, where we dove into some of our favorite Super Bowl halftime show moments of all time. Now, to put this in perspective, this show was recorded in 2021 during COVID, so the Super Bowl halftime performances of The Weeknd, Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, Eminem, Mary J. Blige, and Kendrick Lamar, as well as Rihanna and Usher's halftime performances are not included in this discussion, but we are talking about pretty much everything else. Now, like always, if you like what you're hearing on the show, you can help me out by either telling a friend, leaving the show a 5-star review wherever you're tuning in, or joining the Patreon Mixtaper community at patreon.com/myweeklymixtape. There you can find ad-free episodes of the show, gain early access to upcoming episodes, chime in on future show topics, become a guest curator, and so much more. Once again, that's patreon.com/myweeklymixtape.
¿Hablas español?
Sprichst du Deutsch?
Kan du norsk?
If you've had that sound from Babbel before, I bet you do. Babbel is the science-backed language learning app that actually works. With quick 10-minute lessons handcrafted by over 200 language experts, Babbel gets you on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. With over 16 million subscriptions sold and a 20-day money-back guarantee, just start speaking another language with Babbel. Right now, up to 55% off your Babbel subscription at babbel.com/Spotify podcast. Spelled BABBEL.com/Spotify podcast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
So let's go back in time and wax poetic about Super Bowl halftime shows, and apologies in advance if you're not a New York Giants fan, because this was one of the few chances in all the years I've been music podcasting to talk about the New York Giants. Jay, I've talked about music all the time on this show, and anyone that knows me knows I'm passionate about music, my kids, and the New York Football Giants. Anybody that knows me.
Yep.
One of my favorite podcasts that I listen to outside of the music sphere of all of our friends that we talk about all the time on the show is a show called Talkin Giants. And I am very excited to bring one of the hosts of Talking Giants onto Tunestiles today to talk a little sports music with us.
It's very exciting.
Yeah, so please welcome Justin Penik from Talking Giants. Justin, thank you for joining us, man.
Brian and Jay, it's awesome to be on with you guys. This is honestly a great honor because usually when I'm asked for interviews, it's about, let's just talk about football. And eventually you talk so much football, it kind of gets a little tiring. You kind of get a little, gets a little old. But this is so fun. Like this is, I'm about maybe 2 years into this whole podcasting thing, and this is one of the first times I'm not really like talking sports, which is kind of cool, kind of neat.
Yeah, so because you said you don't like going on shows and talking about football and talking about sports, Jay, why don't we ask him some questions about football and sports before we get to that?
Yeah.
Right. Considering that the show
Just indoctrinate him right into
considering that the show that you host is about Giants football. Now, in full disclosure, I am not a fan of the Blue. Now, I rooted for the Blue, what was it, 92 when they won?
Against the Bills?
Yeah.
91 against the Bills.
Yeah, 91. That was the one, because I am a Dolphins fan, and I have to root against the Bills.
Right.
So I was very happy that the Giants did win in 91, and for a little while, I admit that I did carry a little bit of, all right, if I'm going to live in New York, I might as well go blue for, for at least, if as long as the Dolphins suck, which unfortunately, what's the running tally? 37 years since they've seen the turf inside a Super Bowl stadium. Yeah. So anyway, you now have this podcast, Talking Giants. Tell us a little bit about how it came together and in its current format, and how you and Bobby Skinner have built the program up over the last couple of seasons.
Yeah, so I started a podcast in 2018 called Bleeding Blue. And then eventually I did that for about 2 years, 2018 season, 2019 season. Did it with a good buddy of mine, David Powis. We found some success. We really hit our stride, especially during the summer when I was able to go to training camp. I did a lot of live streams, did a lot of social media content. We were knocking out podcasts pretty much every day in the month of August. We had a podcast episode out previewing a player, and we kind of found some momentum, found our stride a little bit. Bobby Skinner, we connected during that 2019 season. I eventually joined Talkin' Giants at the start of 2020. Talkin' Giants is a part of John Boy Media. It's a John Boy Media company. It's actually funny. I started podcasting because of John Boy and Jake, what they were doing at Talkin' Yanks. If you're a Yankees fan, even if you're a baseball fan, I feel like you know the John Boy Media YouTube channel and their breakdowns.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I started podcasting because of him, even before he had the YouTube channel, even before he did the breakdowns. And now to kind of be with that company, to be in their company and to be a company man, kind of 2 years later. And I said, like I said before, I'm kind of young. It's kind of like a dream come true, so to speak. So Bobby Skinner, we connected during 2019 season, had a lot of success during 2020 when I joined Talkin' Giants, and we're looking forward to attacking the offseason. And we're growing on the YouTubes. We're now the highest rated and most rated Giants podcast in the world. It's kind of very proud to say that, and very humble, very thankful to say that. So yeah, we're gonna have a lot of fun.
So we're going to talk Super Bowl halftime shows now.
See, now, I don't think it's entirely accurate to say what was your favorite performance, because this is going to be all subjective as to who our favorite artists are, right?
Not necessarily. You see, Tom Petty's was my favorite performance because I was there.
Well, and he is your favorite artist.
He is my favorite artist. So that just timed out perfectly. But as a third prong to that, I made $20 off that halftime show.
There you go.
Because during the second quarter, they handed everybody a sheet of paper and said, be ready to sing along with these Tom Petty classics. So I called my folks and bet them $20 that I can predict the entire set list in order. And they took me up on it.
Oh.
And as soon as halftime was over, my father called me up and said, they gave you the lyrics or something. You're so full of shit. There's no way you guessed that.
Put one over on your parents. Wow, man.
But we flew into Vegas before the Super Bowl, and I actually threw $20 on Eli winning the MVP and the Giants winning. We ended up winning a couple $100, which paid for, 1/10 of one of the tickets, but it felt good. It felt good. So you're right, Jay. These are Super Bowl halftime shows, but some of them, like trivia. Does anyone know who the first Super Bowl halftime show was?
No, not at all.
Yeah, and there's a reason for that. For the first 2 decades of the Super Bowl halftime show, it wasn't the musical experience that we have known. It's not the spectacle. It was the Super Bowl one featured the University of Arizona Symphonic Marching Band, Grambling State University Marching Band, Al Hurt, and the Anaheim High School Anna High Steppers drill team and flag girls.
What?
The halftime shows used to be like the Rose Bowl parades.
Right,
it was
right.
all marching bands.
Sure.
And they always went above and beyond for the Super Bowl to get the biggest and best marching bands. It wasn't until much later into the Super Bowl story that rock artists started joining the fold. The first rock artist that we would call rock to perform at the Super Bowl would be Super Bowl 22, 1988, when Chubby Checker came out and performed with the Rockettes. And even then, that was more towards the marching band side of things, but they were just dabbling and testing the waters with Chubby Checker. And that's how it slowly morphed into the Super Bowl that we know today, the halftime show.
Well, I think what happened in Super Bowl 21, the beginning of the halftime show, because that's the Super Bowl that also the Giants are in. Giants won against the Denver Broncos 39-20.
Yes.
George Burns comes out of his balloon, comes out of some Disney balloon with Snow White on his arm, cigar in the other hand. And he said, "Pretty girl, little too young for me." And I'm thinking to myself, Georgie, how young do you need him? And he's smoking this cigar, and then he introduces the band. So I think maybe they looked at themselves at that point. It's like, yeah, maybe let's not get, I don't know who George Burns is, by the way. He seems like a wild guy. Let's not have George Burns come out of a Disney balloon of Mickey Mouse ears with Snow White on his arms and saying, cute girl, a little too young for me. Let's change it up and let's get some better acts in here.
Yeah,
for sure.
Well, my parents, where I told you the story of how I went with my wife to the 2007 Super Bowl, my grandfather was actually one of the labor foremen that helped build the original Giants stadium. So my father had been on the Giants list for many years up until that point, and that's how my parents ended up with Giants season tickets. And they went to Super Bowl 21. I was out there with them, but I stayed with my uncle and cousins for that day and watched the game at home while they were at the Rose Bowl. But it was still, I asked him, what'd you think of the halftime show? He goes, interesting. It was there. But it wasn't like when we went, my dad's like, you get to see Tom Petty and I got to see, the land of make-believe marching band songs. It's definitely come a long way. Now, again, after Chubby Checker, Jay, Super Bowl 23, they brought out an Elvis impersonator.
What? What?
Wait, I can't even. An Elvis impersonator called Elvis. I can't even say it. Elvis Presto.
Oh, no.
And they did a mix of like Stray Cats and Elvis songs. And it was really, really bad. Really bad.
And this is 1989. Now, I'm going to remind you, in 1989, I was almost 15. When Super Bowl 23. I mean, that just goes to show you guys, there's not a lot of Super Bowls that we are, we're still young into this thing.
And then Super Bowl 25, which was another Giants Super Bowl, Jay, where I'm keeping this connected here.
Yeah, that's the one I'm fairly sure I watched, maybe not entirely sober. I could be wrong.
Well, that was the New Kids on the Block were the halftime show.
Yeah. Yep.
Along with Disney characters again, because Walt Disney did the Super Bowl. Yep. But the difference was, and I remember this visually because we were at my parents' friend's house, they showed the halftime performance after the game because it was right during Operation Desert Storm, and they cut to the news during halftime because of everything going on. But I remember watching New Kids on the Block, and, at the time I was in high school. I was like, okay, so they did pop acts, and this is where the NFL said, wait a minute, we're onto something here. And the rest, honestly, for the most part, is history of rock acts becoming into it. And I don't want to name any other ones now because I'd like to try to get into some of all of our favorites here at the topic at hand. So, Justin, being our guest, you got 54 different choices here. What are some of your favorite Super Bowl moments?
So there's some obvious ones, and I want to save some obvious ones, but there was some that I was rewatching. I kind of want to start off with Diana Ross in 1996.
Okay.
I have a whole thing.
That's a good
I have a whole thing. There was so much going on. There was too much going on. And Diana Ross, not typically football music where you want to get pumped up and get ready for the second half and party. Bruce Springsteen, absolute party. That was a party, like the energy that he brought. Diana Ross brings energy. It's a different kind of energy. But there were so many dancers on the stage. so many people on the field being part of the show. And this is before they had fans. This is before they had fans actually on the field and they were part of the show where it feels like more like a concert.
Right.
But there were people on the field and they were bumping into each other. Like they were all a part of the show. The camera would go onto the field and people, excuse me, they were just be squirming. So early onto the show, they also released like probably 1,000 balloons in the air. And I'm thinking to myself, well, what was the aftermath of that? Where did they go? What section did they land in? Or just people outside the stadium? And I'm talking about thousands. And it wasn't individual balloons. They were all just together. They just released them into the air. We don't care. Okay. So her costume changes were awesome. Now kind of like to the music to the show. Her costume changes were awesome. Whenever a child choir is used, it pulls at my heartstrings. You get some bonus points. I think Bruno Mars used the child choir to start. It automatically gets the goosebumps flowing in you. I get goosebumps during Ain't No Mountain High Enough, church choir vibe, and child choir, so you get double bonus points. She ends with I Will Survive, with more costume changes. And then a helicopter appears. And she says, oh, here comes my ride. She gets on this helicopter, sits on the edge, and just flies away.
Wow.
That was the halftime show. So, and I'm also thinking to myself, there are hundreds of people on this field. There are so many dancers on this stage. Where are they landing this helicopter? They landed it right on the stage. They strap her in. She waves and flies away. Take Me Higher. That was the song that was playing as she was flying away.
Oh my God, the puns. She's like flying through the air going, you get it yet? You get it? You hear the song playing? I'm up here now.
So it was low-key a favorite of mine. There's some obvious favorites, and I think we'll get to it, but that was an underrated one where it was part of like Diana Ross is awesome. She has insane hits, great hits, but doesn't really fit football. And there was just so much going on.
All right. I'm going to see you with that one, and I'm going to follow up with my number 3, Jay, if you don't mind, because this is actually the year following the one Justin just mentioned. This was Super Bowl 31, and it took place in 1997. And the lineup, to me, was just one of the coolest lineups you ever got at the Super Bowl. The Blues Brothers, ZZ Top, and James friggin' Brown. Now, on paper, you're like, that seems a little odd. But you get the Blues Brothers coming out on stage. You had Jim Belushi playing the role for John, and you had John Goodman in his role that he would eventually play in Blues Brothers 2000 on stage. You had the full Blues Brothers band. They come out with Everybody Needs Somebody to Love, which my wedding theme was based on the Blues Brothers for our entrances. And then Soul Man. That was like their quote-unquote hit from television. And as they're finishing that, James Brown follows up on stage and they go into I Got You, I Feel Good, and Get Up, Sex Machine, as only James Brown can do it. And you're thinking, wow, that's odd. That's like a weird transition. And then all of a sudden, the Eliminator drives out onto the field. And up on stage is ZZ Top for Tush and Legs. And then all the artists, Blues Brothers, ZZ Top, and James Brown do Give Me Some Lovin' by the Spencer Davis Group. And they jam it out. Now, obviously, they're all singing to backing tracks. We know. You're not fooling anybody. We get it. We understand. These are not live performances. And we'll talk about this when we get to Bruno Mars at some point. But we know that these were either pre-recorded or they're using the actual song, the studio recording, and just kind of throwing some reverb on it, which I think that's exactly what they did for ZZ Top songs. But don't hold me to that. I think James Brown's vocals and the Blues Brothers vocals were pre-recorded. But regardless, they have to do that for technical reasons because, as like Justin mentioned, you're wheeling out 3 stages and 5,000 people for a 15-minute performance that you don't have time to sit there and get mics checked and everything else. And you're not just going to run a mixer off of one of these floating stages and just plug in an XLR and be like, all right, send it out to 10 million people. So we get it. It's the spectacle that goes along with the songs. So that was definitely a spectacle. I love the Blues Brothers. They're iconic in pop culture. And then, I mean, ZZ Top is legendary, and James Brown, one of the greatest soul artists of all time. I mean, that was just a fun who's who. And I just vividly remember watching it as a kid, loving it, saying like, this was a hell of a lot of fun. And it was the first Super Bowl that I remembered that was that much fun, even more so than Michael Jackson. And just because of all these different artists coming together. So, Jay?
Yeah, so you want to get to Bruno Mars. That would be my number 3. And I'll say this. Look, Bruno Mars, I like Beyonce. I think she does really, really well. Coldplay, I take her to leave it. I'm not a big fan of Coldplay. But when they revealed Bruno Mars in for the Uptown Funk with Mark Ronson was just unbelievable. And that cemented, I think, Bruno Mars's place in pop royalty.
That was such a fun performance. That performance was one of those ones where when I was watching it, I said, you know what? We're looking at a future legend. This is a guy whose name I think you will be hearing 30 years from now because he showed off his prowess behind the drums. He rocked out, obviously bringing the Chili Peppers up here. Here's where my little rant on the pre-recorded. Flea on purpose didn't plug his bass in and was jumping up around and spinning around. And like at some points he would even hold the bass, showing it was not plugged in. That was just his way of like, this is all fake, but we're having fun up here. That's like the middle finger that as only the Chili Peppers could do it. But the way that Bruno Mars and his band conducted himself on that stage, you saw somebody that could span generations. My parents were sitting there going, this guy is awesome. Obviously, my kids were there losing their minds because they loved that song at the time, and they were really young at the time. And my wife and I, so 3 generations of people enjoying one artist. That speaks to longevity. And that has not happened a lot in the 2010s. A lot of the times I'm sitting there going,
Right.
And there's like a group of people that really love it, like Coldplay. Sorry, Coldplay.
Well, I'll say, I mean, I don't hate them. I've never been a huge fan.
That was probably one of my least favorite Super Bowl halftime performances. I get it. They're hugely popular. Sorry to all the Coldplay fans out there. I just felt like it was watered down compared to some of the other Super Bowls.
I feel like some of the Coldplay fans feel like it's very culty. Like you love them and you really love them. Like that Coldplay is your go-to. Or it's like, you can kind of do without. And people that really love it get on you. A little culty.
A little bit.
Yeah, I could definitely, that's a good way to put it. And then pretty much with all halftime shows or life in general at that point, you always have to be on the lookout for that moment that could become bigger than the event itself. And in the case of the J-Lo and Shakira performance, the meme that came from Shakira's part of the performance lived on for several weeks after the performance.
Katy Perry with the shark.
With Left Shark, yeah, for sure.
Left Shark. And then obviously the big one.
Nipple slip.
Yeah, I mean, really, does anybody name one song Janet Jackson performed during that whole set? Either one of you. Go ahead. Don't look it up. You see, you can't. No one can.
I didn't, to be honest, I mean, and listen, we joke and it's funny and it's true, but I only saw that on replays on the news because I was working that night. And I could not see the game, and I couldn't watch the halftime show because I'm covering it. So there was no way for me to even know what was going on. And when I saw it afterwards, I mean, I couldn't have told you what she's saying. Didn't she do Rhythm Nation? I couldn't.
Maybe. But the point is, and I'm not saying that the performance was bad. I'm saying that the story,
the
event of that happening overshadowed anything that possibly could have happened. And in the world we live in now with instant access to millions of people's opinions, that's why Left Shark became such a big thing for Katy Perry, again, overshadowing the performance.
So funny.
And like I mentioned, the Shakira meme from last year.
I loved J-Lo and Shakira. One, there are 3 main beats of that performance that did it for me, that put this into the top 3 for me. 1, 2 Latina ladies who were singing in their own language, which I think a lot of times, I've told you a couple of times, Bri, where a few of the artists from New York City would come through New York One when I was working up there, and they would bring, we would get to interview them for New York One Noticias, which was great. I love Spanish pop. Like, I think it's amazing. It's a lot of fun. It's sexy. It's great. It's good music.
There's a reason why so many of those songs cross over to American pop radio.
100%. And I think they brought that to the table, and I think that was a first, really, in terms of Super Bowl halftime shows. Secondly, both of those women are in their 40s, are they not? And I'm sorry, they were singing? They both looked amazing. And the production quality of the show was top notch. I mean, yes, it was frenetic. It was crazy. It was all over the place. But that's the feel of that music. I can't.
And I completely understand, but my thing was I felt like they tried to cram too many songs in. You've got like this 12-minute time limit.
Okay.
And where like the other side of the spectrum, when Tom Petty performed, he did 4 songs. And he did most of each of those songs. Same thing with Springsteen when they did the whole classic rock run. They did 2 or 3, maybe 4 songs. Kind of at the point that Justin was talking about earlier, the Black Eyed Peas was when they started mashing in different bands and guest appearances really heavily and trying to put in as many songs as possible, where it becomes a medley. But depending on the pace of that medley, it just, again, I knew... I'd say 3/4 of the songs that they performed and 25% I didn't know, but they were changing so fast I almost felt myself having a hard time keeping up. That was my only critique. I thought the performance was fantastic. I think all the performances on these, honestly, there's never really been maybe Elvis Presto.
But Brian, like you said, if they're fitting in so many songs in a span of 12 minutes, right, with multiple artists. And this is a little bit of a hot take, but it's just how I felt at the time. I didn't fully appreciate what J-Lo and Shakira did until I was able to rewatch the performance the next day on YouTube. At the time, I felt overwhelmed. I felt like, whoa, that was too much. We were running around. We were doing a lot. The brilliance of those 2 women, even before they stepped on the stage, was very apparent. But after the performance it was done, especially Super Bowl halftime shows, I feel like they have the tendency to take a little long. The beginning is always like, all right, what are we getting into here? Which is why I think Bruno Mars's beginning was awesome. Yeah. With the child choir and then drums.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, okay, we're in. 2 big W's right there. So it took me until the next day to really appreciate their greatness because of kind of how much was going on, Brian. But Jay and Brian, I agree with kind of both of your points. It was brilliant. 2 awesomely talented women, but it also was a lot. And that's the risk that you run with fitting in too much in a span of 12 minutes to make it so much of a production.
Sure, and I'm sure the both of them were so excited that they just wanted to get as much, in there as of their own catalogs as they possibly could.
But it was a true testament to where you're sitting there going, "Oh, I know that one. I know that one too." Because being Jay, we have talked about this over the last 15 years, how we've gravitated away from radio, and the radio that we do get is, you're in the car with somebody and they'll change the station. Maybe they listen to the radio more than I do, and you'll catch a song here or there. But it's not the same where everybody was listening to specific stations and we all kind of honed in the 80s and early 90s where we had our cluster of stations and we knew the music we were getting out of it. Now it's very much music's coming from everywhere. And I think a lot of songs are in our vernacular, but we don't necessarily know them until they're presented to the world. And one example of that would be the song Zombie Nation.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Most people, when they hear that, what? I've never heard that song.
Yes, you have.
Yes, you have. And they'll argue with you. I've never heard a song called Zombie Nation. And yes, you have. And then when they hear it, oh, that's what that's called? Yes. And that's a good example of what I was going with there.
It was very exciting when Daddy Yankee crossed over with Despacito, right? And it just helped propel that momentum of what Shakira was doing, what J-Lo was doing. And I mean, Shakira's done many, many Spanish-speaking albums, and they're fantastic. The music's great, and her voice is brilliant. I enjoy her 100%. I don't always understand everything she's saying, and that's okay. Music is a universal language. I think we've all said that many times in our lives, let alone on this show. But for the most part, I mean, J-Lo playing Selena and bringing Tejano music into the pop culture, really opening up those doors. Gloria Estefan, for crying out loud.
And Miami Sound Machine was also a Super Bowl halftime performer in the 90s.
That they were, because if I'm not mistaken, Mr. and Mrs. Gloria Estefan are part owners, or were part owners, of the Miami Dolphins.
Ooh, I did not know that, Dolphins fan.
Yes, wow. I do.
So, Justin, we still have a bunch of Super Bowl halftime shows to talk about. So what's your number 2?
My number 2. Now, I just publicly bashed him on social media because I do not like his voice. But again, Super Bowl halftime show, a little bit more about a performance. Bruce Springsteen is my number 2 Super Bowl halftime show. I rewatched it today, and I was thinking to myself, let's just give it a try. Let's just give it a try. Give Bruce a chance. Because usually, for somebody who never really listens to Bruce, because I don't like the sound of his voice. It's not pleasing to my ears. And this is somebody from New Jersey, and that's a sin to say. And I recognize that. I recognize I'm a bad guy. I recognize this, okay?
You're a traitor to your kind, Justin.
I am. I really am. I lost 15 followers because of some of my beliefs on Bruce Springsteen.
Wow.
This past weekend. Yeah, it was
Note to self, don't bash the
dip.
boss. Check. Okay.
it was a good dip down. But I watched it, and I said, man, I hate myself for not loving the boss. I hate myself for not loving him. Because the energy that he brought, it made the rest of the E Street Band look like they were sleeping. And that's nothing against the E Street Band. And also there's an iconic shot when he slides with the guitar, the crotch shot, just right into the camera. And he's laughing. He's laughing because he knows America just got to see his crotch. And then he gets up and he still continues to play. So what a halftime show. Even though, like I said, don't like the sound of his voice, at least recorded. I think live is a little bit better. It's a little bit more pleasing to the ears. But yeah, what a halftime show. What a show.
Bruce Springsteen's performance was up there with Tom Petty's to me. It didn't make my top 3 list because I have another one at number 2. Obviously, there's no shock what my number 1 is, so we'll just wait for later for that. But Bruce Springsteen's was a classic example of how a rock band can bring the house down.
Yeah.
They came out on that stage and tore it up, and they're a stadium band. So this is what they do. They're made to play stadiums. You're not going to see a Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band at a Birch Hill nightclub or a Starland Ball. I'd love to.
On Broadway?
On Broadway, but that was just him and a guitar at $700 a ticket.
Yeah, I guess.
So, Jay, did Bruce make your top 3?
No.
Okay.
No, but I enjoyed that performance for sure.
Yeah, my number 2 now is from 2007, the year before Tom Petty, and it was the best example of how taking a medley of songs and making it work and being so iconic as a moment in music history is Prince's Super Bowl 41 performance.
Yep.
Opening up with the We Will Rock You intro from Queen, which everybody knows is like the sports anthem. Let's just be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And then the opening organ of Let's Go Crazy. There's no, really, that was tailor-made. And then the rest of his performance by bringing out, doing Proud Mary and All Along the Watchtower. And then a friggin' Foo Fighters song. Because the Foo Fighters covered Darling Nikki back in the 90s when The Color and the Shape came out. Mm-hmm. And Prince heard it and liked it and kind of extended his love for the Foo Fighters with his version of Best of You, which, my God, dude, is just incredible. And then ending the performance on Purple Rain during a real, honest-to-God rainstorm.
Yeah.
I mean, really. This was just such a perfect moment.
Yeah.
The guy directing that performance must have been just sitting there going, I'm directing history, because he was. That Purple Rain guitar solo in the pouring rain as he's just, dude, I'm getting goosebumps just reliving it, talking about it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's my number 1.
That's your number 1?
My number 1 too.
Oh, wow. I just cleared out the house with everyone's number 1.
There you go.
Man.
So back to you for your number 1, which I think nobody will be surprised by.
Nobody's going to be shocked about. But honestly, there's a reason, though. Being there in person. Yes, it was looking at the back of a curtain.
Yeah.
But I was still in the same room as Tom Petty. And it was so amazing because he's one of my favorite artists. But at the same time, we were still having fun at that point, just taking in the moment that we were at the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. Because when I walked into that game, I kept saying to her, I had my Shockey jersey on. I said, I'm just happy to be here. The Patriots are 18-0. My wife's whole family, my in-laws, they're all from New England. They're all Pats fans. I said, I'm just happy to be here. I literally am just thankful that I'm getting this opportunity. I know that the Giants probably won't win this one, but man, they gave them such a good run in week 16 of that season. Let's just hope for the best. And I was a calm zen. I had during the game, I had a Patriots fan before the game, drunk, come up to me as we were walking around the Super Bowl experience and start yelling in my face of how he hated Shockey. And I'm looking at my wife going, I don't want to get thrown out. And all of his friends were around him going, dude, stop it. We don't want to get thrown out. So literally the friends brought us around while the one friend took this guy off. They're like, we're so sorry. Like really cool Pats fans. Like for the most part, everybody we talked with, except for the fact that they all were saying to me, hope you guys enjoyed that you paid money to watch the Giants lose, because this is the crowning of the 19-0 season and you're just here to witness it. And we were talking with a couple behind us in line that told us, father and son, God bless them, they're really nice folk. And he said, you know, how they asked us how much we spent for the tickets, and we, as Giants season ticket holders, got them for the base price that year of a cheap $750 per ticket.
Oh,
cheap, considering what they go for now. And he told me, he's like, well, my son and I have bonded over football since he was a kid, so I paid $3,500 a seat to watch him witness the perfect season so we could live it together.
Ouch.
And he goes, I'm really sorry that you and your wife wasted $1,500 to watch the Giants lose. And I said, chances are you're right. I said, but God forbid the Giants pull out an upset, a David and Goliath story. When you're walking to your car tonight, just say to yourself, $7,000. And I looked at my wife as we're walking to the car and said, God, I hope I don't run into that guy. He's going to murder me in this parking lot.
And as luck would have it, he probably would have. Because they definitely pulled the upset. And by the way, thanks for that, because the Dolphins still retain the perfect season.
Yes.
So, Justin, I gotta ask, being we are merging in some football talk here, as a Giant fan, that day has to resonate with you as one of the greatest moments for a Giant fan. What are some of your thoughts about that game? I mean, to me, the second Super Bowl where they beat them the second time, all that did was give me a lifetime of bragging rights against my entire in-laws and extended family, because every time I go up there, they pick on me about the Giants, and over the last, 7 years, they've had a good thing, but I always look at them and go, we beat you twice in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
The Patriots have to beat the Giants 3 times in the Super Bowl before you're allowed to talk shit to me. So I think I've got at least my lifetime of leniency now.
But especially what that second one did is it cemented Eli Manning's legacy.
100%.
Because that was his team, that was on his arm, that was on his back. So that was awesome to see if you were just an Eli fan, and especially since Michael K's show, he actually said that summer, I feel like I'm an elite quarterback. You know, they asked him one of these cliche, phrases of, do you think you're elite? And Eli Manning's not going to come out and say no. We kind of put him in a tough spot. So that's what that second one did. And if you're a big fan of Eli, that was like his big moment, more than 07 in my opinion. But what 07 did, especially against Bill, former Giants defensive coordinator, and Tom Coughlin was the wide receivers coach for those kind of Super Bowl teams in the 80s and early 90s too. So it was former Giants coaches, but Bill has always been the one that I feel like was more highly regarded in Giants land and within Giants fans. We always wanted Bill. We always wanted Bill Belichick to take over after Parcells. And we were always kind of jealous of what the Patriots were doing. And Coughlin was on his way out. If they didn't make playoffs that year, Coughlin was going to be fired. There were going to be questions about Eli Manning. Maybe even if they lost in the first round to the Tampa Bay Bucks against John Gruden, which I don't view John Gruden as a great coach, by the way. I think he inherited a pretty good team from Tony Dungy, but neither here nor there. They were on their way out because that would have been 3 years straight of first-round playoff exits, and they didn't even win the division that year. They got into the wild card because of Ahmad Bradshaw having an awesome run in a snowy game against Buffalo. So what it really did, I think I draw a lot of similarities. If you're a Giants fan, if you're an older Giants fan, I draw a lot of similarities between 2007 and 1987, where obviously 1987, when they won the Super Bowl, then it was decades of bad football and bad play. But even you got just a similar feeling that if the Giants were going to let go of Coughlin and if they were going to somehow have Eli Manning not work, they were going to enter into a huge period of instability that the Giants are not familiar with. The Giants are not familiar with constantly moving on from head coaches without some sort of success. Even with Fossil, they won an NFC championship.
Yeah.
They're not familiar with, instability maybe at the quarterback position. They had Sims for over a decade. They had Y.A. Tittle for a long period of time. They're familiar with it if they're at the bottom of the barrel, which you didn't feel like the Giants were at the bottom of the barrel in, 05, 06, and then 07. So they were about to enter a very big period of instability and an unknown period. But what that victory did is it cemented the New York Football Giants back as the New York Football Giants, as one of the most successful franchises in the National Football League. So that's what it really did. And for me, I was a fan for life. That's what it did for me right there. Seeing Tyree with the helmet catch, Jay Alfred's, like I said, Jay Alfred, that sack, that's a moment I look back on and I just smile every time I see it. And I see the hit and I go, ooh, like I just clinch it up and I know it's coming, but it gets me every time. So it made me a fan for life after that moment, and couldn't be more thankful for that game.
Awesome. Now, did we get everybody's top 3 here? I want to make sure that no one missed out, right?
No, I think we're all good here.
Now, our friend Amanda from the Strike a Chord podcast brought up one that actually none of us talked about, and was a very memorable Super Bowl halftime show. It was the year that MTV took over and tried to make it the TRL of Super Bowl halftime shows. And they brought out NSYNC, Britney Spears, Mary J. Blige, Nelly, and then for the rock crowd, they brought in Aerosmith.
And I'll say this, it was a good show.
Yeah.
A lot of the Aerosmith purists were, Britney Spears singing Aerosmith song. Hey, dude, shut up. She's got a good voice. It's not awful. It's like,
it was a merging of the genres, trying to make, people were offended that Aerosmith did Walk This Way with NSYNC. I'm like, they did Walk This Way with Run DMC.
Yes.
They did, they're all about merging with other bands.
I was just going to make that point where we've said many times on this show, right from my mouth, Aerosmith is a band that blends. They've reinvented themselves so many times over their career that of course they're going to do Walk This Way with NSYNC. And of course it's going to kick ass because NSYNC was awesome. I'm sorry, I'm not ashamed to admit that I liked NSYNC. They had a good thing going at the turn of the century. And I think out of that, Justin Timberlake is an amazing performer. If you're looking at people who pick up the mantle for the purple one, it's going to be Justin Timberlake, it's going to be Bruno Mars. What else do you need?
Now, Frank also wrote in, U2 after 9/11 was pretty powerful.
Oh, absolutely.
That's a tough one
the return
for me.
The return to normal.
Yeah, that was that was hard to watch. Yep. That's all I'll say. Not because it's U2. We joke about U2, but beautiful performance. But it literally puts a lump in my throat just talking about it here. It was emotionally driven for sure.
That was the season that ushered out my exodus from New York City the first time following the attacks. And, we haven't talked an awful lot about that here, but boy, that was a really, really dark time. So,
yeah.
And I think they did a pretty good job. I mean, they had a pretty big responsibility going into that show. And
I would not have
they
wished that
on.
And that
at all.
Now, Steve wrote in Tom Petty 100%, so I'm glad I'm justified there. Jamie wrote in, Bruno Mars really surprised me. Even my dad loved it, and he never heard of them, which speaks to our point.
Exactly.
He crossed over generations. The kids loved it, our generation loved it, and our parents loved it. That makes you an icon moving forward. And then finally, Brian wrote in, Prince, can you make it rain harder? Really? I'm hearing that in a Chandler Bing voice. Can it rain any harder?
Rain any harder?
Like that moment, really. And then Springsteen, so he's echoing everybody here, Tom Petty, and then Lady Gaga's, which was also...
We didn't talk about her either.
Hers was fantastic, too.
Yeah. The song You and I love that friggin' song. She can do no wrong. I love everything Gaga does. Tammy and I, my wife, were watching A Star Is Born, and
yes.
I love Bradley Cooper because he's Bradley Cooper. He's Rocket freaking Raccoon. And every time that young woman opens her mouth, it's just normally the most beautiful sound comes out of it. You could take all of the early Fame Monster stuff, and it's glam pop, but her voice is solid.
Oh, her voice is absolutely incredible. I mean, I can't say enough good things about her voice. I mean, she did an album with Tony Bennett, and it worked. Yeah. Why? Because she can actually sing.
Absolutely.
You can't just sit on a track with Tony Bennett if you don't have the range to be able to sing in that jazz style.
Exactly.
Whereas she could use her auto-tune on her voice artistically, and it works. But she can also belt out with the best of them without any effects, and that works too. So I don't mind auto-tune as a tool in certain songs. I mean, even Cher used it on Believe as like a tool of her vocal line. Yeah. And we know Cher can sing. Yep. But for people that only use auto-tune, which makes you question if they even can sing.
Yeah, and her transition, right? The transition from being what she was at the start, and I know, Jay, you kind of mentioned this, but what she was doing at the start and all the extracurriculars that was attached, and now it's like, oh, now we know Lady Gaga not because of what she wears. We know Lady Gaga because of her voice, because of her talent, and I think that's rare. I think that's rare for some, and it's also smart by her to get her foot on the scene, where odds are, the sad thing is, in today's world, she may have not been as famous as she is right now if she had not have done that. And that's a shame, but smart, but also very glad it's worked out to now, when we think of Lady Gaga, we're not thinking of the meat dress, we're thinking of her voice and her talent.
So there are 3 women, female vocalists, modern, that I would consider modern. Anything after 1995, somewhere around there. Christina Aguilera has an amazing voice, and unfortunately we didn't get to hear it early in her career. We got to hear it later in her career after she did the what was that song, Brian, with the horns, where she took off and did the big band thing for a minute? Candyman. Thank you.
Candyman and Ain't No Other Man are like the 2 that I love from her. Yeah.
That was such a fun album.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, wait a minute. This 16-year-old like Disney kid can sing, right? And then there's Lady Gaga and Ariana Grande.
Okay.
That kid has a freaking voice. And you know what? When I realized it was not during any of her performances, which any of her records that I've heard, but when
You're going to say Fallon, aren't you?
When she was on Fallon, yes, doing all the voice impressions. Their voice, that's the moneymaker right there.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Now, Justin, I'm not going to let you get away with this show without talking about something here. Mm-hmm. I've seen, we're friends on Twitter, and I've been following your feed and listening to the show, and I know how large of a fan of Shania Twain you are. And Shania Twain has performed at a Super Bowl halftime show. I'd like to know, because you talk about her as your highness and how you have her on this pedestal of greatness, how the hell didn't she make your list? Just out of curiosity, being one of your favorite artists.
I did not think Shania Twain's halftime show fully personifies who she is as an artist. I didn't like, first of all, only one song. She only got one song, and it was a backtracked version of Man, I Feel Like a Woman. Now, I think back in the day, before she had Lyme's disease, and before she went through her divorce with Mutt Lange, and before she even just parted ways with Mutt Lange, because Mutt Lange is a musical genius in his own right, I think she had an amazing voice. Amazing voice. I don't know if maybe 2003, 2002, if she was going through some vocal troubles, but like, we said before, the backtrack isn't necessarily just because you have a bad voice. It's because you have so many people, so many things going on, and it's just not realistic sometimes to have the actual person sing when there's so many moving parts. Right. Putting Shania Twain on the national stage like that was not who she was as an artist. I think why I love Shania, and let me even just preface it this way: how big of a Shania Twain fan I am. Since she has come back, so 2015. I have seen her every opportunity I can get. I have seen her a total of 4 times. Twice in concert, Rock This Country Tour, Now Tour, and then I went to Las Vegas. I went to her Vegas residency in Caesars, the You're Still the One, and then I just went to the one in December before COVID, went to the Let's Go Las Vegas residency. So my mom bought Come On Over in 97, and we would play it in her Jeep Grand Cherokee growing up on on CDs. I am young enough for CDs. I will say that.
Right.
Not young enough for record players or anything like that, or cassette tapes, but I'm young enough for CD players. So we listened to Come On Over in the car, and just that's how I was introduced to music. So it wasn't even at that point one of those things where I could fully appreciate just how diverse that album is. 9th best-selling album of all time, by the way. We sometimes forget this. Top 10 selling album of all time. Come On Over. So I didn't get to appreciate just how diverse it was. So then I put it down for a few years, I go through my musical stages, phases, and then in high school, I just start, I just want to listen to some songs from my childhood. So I start playing Come On Over again. I'm like, oh my God, like this is great. We talked about, you have to eat, right? And you have to eat and you have to fit a certain brand. You have to fit a certain category of country, pop, rock, whatever. And that's how you're going to get to your audience, and that's what's going to sell. Shania didn't have that. Right. I would say definitely her first album, her self-titled album, that was an album she didn't write. But The Woman in Me, kind of mostly country. She blended in a little bit of rock, but especially the Come On Over and Up albums were just everything. For Up, she made 3 different versions of the same songs because she didn't want to fit a certain box, a certain category. It's like, oh, you want to put me in a box? Here's 3 different versions of the same songs. So you can't. You literally can't. So I love Shania Twain. Love her backstory. Love her upbringing. She went through a lot of adversity, and I love the way that she kind of approaches music and the way that she was really a trailblazer for a lot of artists. I don't think there is a Taylor Swift. I don't think Taylor Swift makes that transition from country to pop and is the biggest superstar in the world right now if it was not for Shania Twain trailblazing that path for her.
You are absolutely right.
I was going to say 100% she is the Garth Brooks to male country music crossing over for what she did for female artists and pop. You would not have a Taylor Swift. That's a great point.
And there you have it.
Don't forget to check out Talking Giants wherever you listen to podcasts if you're a Giant fan. And to all the mixtapers listening, you can connect with My Weekly Mixtape on almost all the social media haunts at My Weekly Mixtape. You can also head to myweeklymixtape.com to check out the full catalog of My Weekly Mixtape episodes. And finally, if you like what you're hearing on the show, you can help me out by either telling a friend, leaving the show a 5-star review wherever you're tuning in, or becoming a Patreon mixtaper at patreon.com/My Weekly Mixtape. There you can find ad-free episodes of the show, gain early access to upcoming episodes, chime in on future show topics, become a guest curator, and so much more. That's all for this week. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, enjoy the tunes and the Super Bowl.
Hey, this is John Moses and Tyler Morrison from the Fight Stories Podcast.
And we want to welcome everyone from Pantheon to check out the podcast that goes from pros to average Joes.
We got MMA champs, boxing champs, NHL tough guys, funniest comedians in the world, and of course, stories from guys like your drunk Uncle Tommy on Thanksgiving.
That's right, because we're the voice of the streets, and we want to hear from you guys, because what's better than hanging out with your crew and reliving the old glory days?
Stories like Rigby, who put that guy's head through a popcorn machine in front of his 5- and 6-year-old son while eating chicken wings at the bar.
It doesn't get any better than that. Everyone has a fight story. We want to hear yours.